All right, in this step, we are ready to move on from step 1, pencil drawing on our final paper, to step 2, Sharpie. So we are still focusing on our object and its contour line. So I have a few things out to help me with this step. Some of you might need things like rulers or tracers depending on the kinds of lines that you drew. Otherwise, I know that I just need my Sharpie and a pencil just in case I need to add anything in and draw it back in, and for its eraser. I also have a bigger eraser next to me. I know I'll be doing a lot of erasing, so if you have another one at home, that'd be really great. So what we're going to do for this step is outline almost all of our pencil lines with a fine point Sharpie. This is what you were all given in your art kit. And if your Sharpies run out or any issues come up with supplies, you'll just have to wait until you're back in the classroom, but we'll do what we can with what we have. Now, as I go over some of these lines, I'll also give other options with different supplies too. But for the majority of us, we will just be using this type of Sharpie. So if I know I'm going to go over all of my pencil lines, what I want to do first is look for dark pencil lines that could be lightened with an eraser. So what I can do is take like a bigger eraser and just gently go over a space and start to lighten it up if I feel like some of my drawing is too dark. Now, some of my pencil's kind of smearing on the paper, but once I go over everything with Sharpie, I'm going to erase everything anyways. So take some time as I go over the next couple of directions just to start going over things with an eraser if you feel like you need to. Otherwise, what you can do if you're not sure is get your final sketch back out. And don't draw on top of your final paper, but you could test your Sharpie and go over your final sketch with your Sharpie, hold it up to the light. Can you see the pencil lines coming through that Sharpie or not? Sharpie does not necessarily just cover all materials up. It's a dark material, so it's gonna cover a lot, but sometimes pencil still shows through. So that's one thing we can do to help prevent that. While you're doing that, I wanna go over some reminders of different examples that I have, things that I've done in the past, and we have our project page in BB9 if you want to look at other student examples. So here's a different example that I did where I showed the sketch of my fan and my postcard example. This is what I ended up with when I went over everything with Sharpie. This entire drawing is done just with this fine point Sharpie. So our goal here is to bring out the contour of our object. We're drawing its outline, right? Some details also need to be gone over with Sharpie, but this isn't a very detailed drawing. I'm just focusing on everything as a line drawing. That way, when I start to add my other materials, I have a little bit of a barrier in between two spaces. So right here, I have oil pastel. Then if I'm going to put pencil in this space, it's nice to have that barrier in between the two. Otherwise, it gets really hard to control our materials and how they start to overlap, and sometimes that can make things more challenging. It also helps us see our objects when everything's filled in. I have a lot of white space left here, but all of these spaces I plan to fill in. So eventually there'll be an overwhelming amount of material on here, and the Sharpie lines allow me to still see my drawing. Now, some of the areas on this example, I actually started to fill with Sharpie. If you're considering filling something in with Sharpie, it should be small spaces only so that we do not see like huge Sharpie lines. There's a lot of things that can go wrong if you don't get specific directions on how to fill spaces in with Sharpie, and it can really take away from your craftsmanship and your overall work. So I'm gonna ask that you don't fill spaces in black until you are in class with me. Let me know, hey, I'm thinking about filling these spaces here in with Sharpie. I can check a larger Sharpie out to you, and we can talk about if that is a good decision or if maybe we should come up with a different plan. Another example that I have here is this other drawing I showed you in my last video. Right, this is what that looks like with Sharpie and with materials added. So something that I did that's a little bit different in this example is I have two different size Sharpies. I went over a majority of the work with this fine point Sharpie. So that's this kind of bigger bold line you see here. It really helps us see certain shapes when I've added like colored pencils to those spots. But I also use an ultra fine point Sharpie. And what I did with this ultra fine point Sharpie, which is a little bit more thin, is I did some of the details on the inside of the fan. So these lines here, and this line across are all done with the ultra fine point Sharpie. So the outer edge is larger and the inner details are more thin. And then I did the postcards just with the ultra fine point Sharpie so that they would be more thin. And that's giving me a variety of lines. Now for some of you, that visually might just be too much. We can really simplify our drawings if we'd like to, if we just have one thickness of Sharpie everywhere. It really makes things look a little bit easier on our eyes. If you would like certain areas done with ultra fine point Sharpie, you're going to check in with me when you're in class, and I will check out a Sharpie too so that you can continue with this step. So for today, you're going to get started with what you can. Again, this step is going to take us a few days in class, so we should get that opportunity to get that from me. If you're someone that's working fully virtual, you're going to have to use what you have if you're not able to pick supplies up from me, because we're going to keep moving with this project. It might take too long for you to pick things up. Another thing that you might have at home is other types of like Micron pens or other thinner Sharpies. Do not use something larger, and do not use color. We are using color supplies in our other materials. For this project, we are only using black Sharpie. So please make sure you're using other supplies if you're able to, and it'll help your project, but you're not breaking away from some of our bigger kind of overarching goals for this unit. So again, most of you should only be using the fine point Sharpie as you work. The ultra fine is an option, and for some of you that might want to use smaller ones you have at home, that is an option. However, when you bring two supplies up next to each other that are very different, the thinner the line, the harder that is to do. All right, so I'm gonna get started here on my drawing, and I'm just gonna pick an area to start going over with Sharpie. My goal for my drawing is I'm gonna do the outline of the object with the fine point Sharpie, and then these tiny little lines, which are like the cracks in the skeleton that allow for the skeleton to have some flexibility to it. These cracks, I'm gonna do the ultra fine point Sharpie. Otherwise, everything else is gonna be one size. So I'm just gonna start to go over my drawing with Sharpie, which seems easy, but we know that Sharpie is permanent, so that when we make mistakes, we're going to have to be flexible with ourselves and learn as an artist how to handle those. And I want to make sure that I've kind of defined my sketch first. So if I have like a lot of like sketch marks in an area like that, I might want to take an eraser and really define where that line is supposed to be and go over with my pencil, make sure I know where I'm drawing as I go. This is a great opportunity for you to plug in, listen to some music as you work, because it is going to take some time. So I'm just gonna do one of these today just to go over a few more things with you, and then you'll work more on your own. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start with my Sharpie, and I'm gonna test it first. I'm gonna use my packet, make sure everything's working well. And I'm going to just carefully start to go over the very contour first, taking my time. And I want to try and stay on the line as much as possible, but once I'm done with an area, I'll be able to take an eraser over the whole thing. That way, any little thing I miss here or there should be removed. All right, I'm gonna go around some of the bigger details here. The nice thing about working on thicker paper is that we don't have to worry about this bleeding through to the table. So if you're ever practicing something on more thin paper, do not do it over your drawing, and think about what table you're working on, especially if you're at home, so that you stack things up. But this paper should be really helpful for us to support our Sharpie lines so they're not going through the paper. And a really big goal for our Sharpie is to give us areas to fill in with different materials, right? This is our contour line drawing, so we're focusing on outlining the contour right now. And then we get to fill it with materials later. My Sharpie's starting to look a little bit light right here, so I'm just gonna go over it one more time. So your Sharpie might start to run out over time, but when you're in the classroom, we can get you a new one. Otherwise, just going over something twice should do the trick. All right, I have 2 more lines here. I'm just gonna focus on this skull first. I have another skull overlapping right here, but I'm just gonna focus on one at a time. I think that'll work better for me. All right, so now I can switch over to my ultra fine point Sharpie, and I'm gonna test it. Make sure it's working okay. And if you are someone that has very straight edges or use a circle tracer or something with a pencil, you want to do that with a ruler. So if I was doing something that was a straight edge with a pencil line, right, I want to line that ruler back up for my Sharpie or for whatever objects I was using as a tracer. Don't let your craftsmanship slide now. You want to use those tools to help with your craftsmanship. So what happens when I make a mistake with Sharpie? I'm gonna have to think, what can I do as an artist? How can I problem solve this situation? Artists are problem solvers. We're always trying to think about what are we trying to achieve? How can we use our materials, our resources, and our creativity to get to that point? So for Sharpie, if we make a mistake, you have some options. So I'll use the bottom of my packet here. If I'm drawing a line and I make a mistake and it goes off the wrong direction, it's supposed to go over here. What I can do is I can just swoop that line back over and maybe it kind of hides within my drawing. Another option, and I'll use the Sharpie that most of you will be using. So if I'm drawing a line and I get a little bit crooked there, I could look at what's around this information. I know I'm adding materials later. If I add a dark color to that space, could I kind of hide that mistake? If so, and if it's not too distracting, I could leave it. And when someone is looking at this really like larger drawing overall, are they gonna notice that small mistake? So one option is just to leave it. Another option then would be to kind of fill in that space. Maybe now my line goes from thin to thick. If that happens in my drawing, when I'm done going over everything else, I'd probably want to say, do I want to do this same thing in a few different spots? That way it doesn't look like it's a mistake. I've now made the viewer of my artwork think that it's intentional. So I've changed it a little bit. I've changed my design slightly just to make that work and to fit in. With our project, we are not using whiteout. First of all, it might not blend in with the white of our paper. Paper color and whiteout can be different just slightly enough for you to be able to see it. Also, when I go over my drawing with other materials, that whiteout is going to start to show, which is not what we want. So we want to choose either to leave it, to try and hide it, or to wait until you come back in to school and I'll help you figure out the best solution. Once I let this area, just make sure it's all dry on the paper for a moment, I'm gonna go over it with an eraser. So what I would probably do is take time to just work through my whole drawing with Sharpie and then erase afterwards. But what you don't wanna do is just start vigorously erasing because your paper can crumple underneath your hand. So what you're gonna do is you're gonna hold down the section that you're working on. Hopefully you have a bigger eraser at home, otherwise you're gonna have to use what you have, whether it's just your pencil eraser. Maybe you do this part in class, so you can use one of my erasers, or like the little removable erasers, whatever you can find to work with at home. Go over the whole thing. Even if I don't see pencil lines, I just go over everything just to make sure I get it, and then that way I don't have to worry about seeing it in my final work. So those are our steps for Sharpie. Pretty simple, but as you start to go over your drawing, and if you're listening to music or you kind of get in the rhythm of things, you need to work slow and focus. Otherwise, that's when we start to see mistakes happen. So good luck, enjoy this process, and we'll add our materials in our next step.